Welcome to my Asshole Podcast. Let's get into it. Today is Thursday's episode. My goodness, has a Court of Thorns and Roses gotten them pretty good. We finally kind of had like our little first fight scene, and we can see that, you know, your boy Tamlin trying to get some cheeks. I ain't gonna lie to you, man. That motherfucker trying to get some cheeks. I don't know. Are you guys like hearing what I'm hearing? Because to me, it just seemed like homeboy trying to get them cheeks. I don't know. But hopefully we get a little more deeper into the story. Hope we get a more of a deep dive into what is going on, because I do want this book to get a little more interesting. I really do. So hopefully it does. This week we have chapters 17 and 18. So hopefully you guys are locked in and ready for this. If you are listening on the playlist, you know, hopefully you guys are all caught up and up to this episode. But without further ado, though, we're going to get into our thread before we get into our book. Today's thread is pretty interesting, and I hope you're not eating. All right? I'm just going to pre-warn you now. Hopefully you are not eating, because this is going to be what's the most disgusting thing you've had to experience. Okay? Make sure you're not eating. And if you want, you could just skip on till the thread is done. Okay? So, all right. On to it. Let's go. When I worked in the ER, we'd unfortunately always get drunk homeless people, especially in the winter. So they always get homeless people coming in to the ER. My patient was in the hallway, and you could always smell them. They smelled different. He seemed off, lethargic, cold. His hospital socks were soaked and dirty. The doctor ordered a blood sugar test, give him a sandwich, and to keep him warm. Better yet, just keep him out of those clothes, she had said. Over the years, I built a nurse intuition, they'd call it, and I felt like something was wrong with him. I got a little closer to him, and I could smell rotten flesh. I asked nurses aside to help me take him to the decon room, where I removed his beanie. An enormous amount of bugs fell out of his beanie and was crawling on his head. There were countless bites and scars on his head. Thank God I'm not skeeved out by bugs, but I jumped back only because I didn't want them on me. Once we took off his jacket, his neck was torn up with bites, old and new cuts, and layered with scar tissue like he had been scratching for months. Little open pustulates and tiny palpulates, I don't know what that is, were everywhere. We literally just stared in disbelief. So we told him to stay put, and we both got out of the room and let all of our bearings out, said what we needed to say, and donned on our gear to protect ourselves: gowns, gloves, masks, eye shield, and took him to the shower room. When we removed his clothes, his boxers were digging into his pelvic area so deep that it had become part of his flesh. Oh my God! And it was mixed with fecal matter from his intestines that were partially exposed. And the scariest part was that he barely flinched. Yo, this man was like a living zombie. Like, this is crazy. Homeboy's got cuts galore. He's got bugs eating the top of his head. His boxers are literally infused to his skin. Apparently his intestines are showing. This man is a real life zombie. That is crazy. Once we got him cleaned up, we took him over to the actual room, and the surgical team took him into the OR within the hour. It ended up eating a tuna sandwich eating a tuna sandwich next to where his stretcher was in the hallway. Wow, bro. That's correct. Like I said, zombie, real life zombie. I'd be like, whoa. And I'm sure to her, she's probably seen this maybe once or twice, but for us ordinary folk, man, that's a little crazy to me. Shit. Okay, well, on to our next one. A couple of months back, I developed an anal abscess due to complications with Crohn's, and waiting for the operation was the most painful thing I've ever had to experience. Thankfully, the NHS managed to fit me in within 24 hours, but I was in no way ready for what was to come. The only way to treat the anal abscess was to cut it open through the arse cheek and drain it out of all of its infected muck. Mine was about the size of a golf ball, large compared to the average abscess. The NHS usually see, and luckily you're knocked out and under general anesthesia for that particular bit. It was during recovery the next day when I had to do the most disgusting thing ever experienced. The thing with an anal abscess is that it has to heal by itself. They don't use stitches, as it has to heal from the inside out. Directly after the op, they packed my golf ball size abscess with gauze to soak up all of the blood, pus, what have you. I was lying on the hospital bed, flying high on morphine, and was brought back to earth dramatically when one of the nurses told me that I should remove the gauze myself, just to go to the showers, reach down, and pull it out. Oh, God. After an hour or so of mentally preparing myself for this task and asking for more morphine, I had headed to the grim shower on the ward, which I reached down to the wound and feel for the gauze and immediately felt it hanging out. It was like nothing else I had ever felt, an alien tentacle dangling sloppily from a sore open wound. It was slippery, slimy, squishy, and extremely hard to get a hold of. I managed to pinch it, feeling my fingers soaked with whatever liquid it had absorbed, and began to pull. It was the worst thing I had ever felt and is almost impossible to describe. Immediately, I wanted to throw up and had to keep stopping to lean against the shower wall to catch my breath and keep it together. Every time I would have to reach back down and keep pulling, unsure of how much was left inside me. I could feel it coming out, and I was fully aware of the amount of blood and viscera, I guess, pooling out of my feet. I managed to pull it out and dropping it on the ground, and had to lean against the wall to compose myself. I felt the wound. I felt the wound to investigate the damage, and my worst fear was confirmed that there was another bit of gauze hanging out and needed removal. God damn, man. My man's is in hell out here. Golly, bro. I couldn't do it. I'd be like, yo, nurse, yeah, you got to get up in here and do this, man, because I can't do this, bro. I can't do this. At this point, I almost broke down in tears, but I knew I had to do the ordeal again. Eventually, I was done and returned to the ward in my hospital bed, traumatized. Hours later, when a nurse arrived, I told her what I had done, and she was horrified. Who told you to do that? Oh, son. I told her it was a nurse from earlier and described her. Oh, right. That's X. She's conky like that. We're supposed to do this for you. Facts. Facts. Because for me, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing this. Oh, and I bet, I would be pissed. I would be so mad. I'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? You know what I went through in there? You know what I went through? Like, this is traumatizing. Like, who the fuck jokes like that? That's no. Come on, man. Oh, Jesus. Dude. I'd be so pissed. So pissed. I'd be like, you can't tell me this. You're joking. Please tell me you're joking. Because I already did it. I already did it. Like... And then I'd be like, do you have to put it back in? You know, because apparently I wasn't supposed to touch it. So, yeah. Do I have to are you going to put it back in? And then you guys got to take it back out? Like, I'd be freaking out. I'd be kind of flipping out. I ain't going to lie to you, because I just did the most traumatic thing ever possible in my entire life. And I might have to go through this again. Like,
bruh.
That's tough. That's tough, man. God. Well, hopefully you never have one of those ever again, because Jesus Christ, that must have been very, very traumatic, and there's no way in hell I would ever listen to a nurse ever again. I'd be like, no, you're lying to me. Stop. I'm being dead serious. I'm like, you're fucking lying to me. Stop. No. Okay. On to our next one. I'm a paramedic. Had a patient throw up bloody spaghetti in my mouth. Oh, that's nasty. I didn't really care for that, bro. Bloody spaghetti. That's disgusting. How do you... Why? Oh, God. Okay. On to our next one. I told y'all, don't be eating, okay? Don't be eating if you listen to this. If you are, you got an iron stomach. I went for a medical procedure. They'd given me a laxative prep, but I hadn't fully emptied. Okay. Eventually, they gave me an enema. It wouldn't have been so bad, but the nurse was in the room with me the whole time. The poor woman had to stand there while I emitted horrid sounds and unspeakable odors. They get you to lie in a sort of square bath on your left side. So after the brown geyser of shame had run dry, that enema was just flushing doo-doo out of his booty hole. God damn. She had to rinse me off. I was mortified for days afterwards. Man. I would feel like a big baby getting an enema, man. Oh God. He said after the brown... What was it? Hold on. The brown geyser was done. That's crazy. And then, I don't know what's crazier, being the person that has to give the enema or being the person that's got to get the enema. I think it's worse. I think it's bad for both, because it's like, if you're the person getting the enema, man, you are embarrassed. You are embarrassed, all the doo-doo coming out of your butt. And then, if you're the person giving the enema, you're probably not only secondhand embarrassed, but you are just disgusted with the amount of it's like, damn, do you clean your booty hole? Like, shit. No pun intended. Like, God, I'm just saying, man. That's bad for both ends, man. All the doo-doo particles that be flying all over the place. That must be person's nightmare. Jeez. Nursing my mother back to health as a young boy is something I'm very proud of, but I'll never forget the nights her colostomy bag would come detached and I'd be woken up by her crying and the smell. I'd have to get up, flick on the lights, and take care of everything before soothing her back to sleep, telling her it's not her fault and she'll be better soon. Oh, hey, yo, kudos to you. You're a real one and a hero. Yeah, I would be like, hey, yo, is there any hospice nurses that I can get? Because, I'm sorry. Colostomy doo-doo. I bet that just smells even worse than, like, doo-doo in the toilet, you know? Because it's just there. It's just there. There's no water. There's no, you know what I mean? There's nothing to mask the smell, nothing. It's just straight on the floor. It's as if somebody just popped a squat and doo-dooed on the floor. You know? Oh, and then I hope you didn't have carpet. Because if you didn't have carpet, oh. Woo, brother. Hope you didn't have carpet. Because if you had carpet, man, doo-doo stains, those stains would never come out, bro. Those stains would never come out. You got to cut up the carpet after that. Like, man. Oh, but kudos to you. You are a real one. You're a hero, because I'm sorry. I don't know if I'd be able to do it. I would try, but I don't know if I could do it. Because I'd be sitting there cleaning up that doo-doo like, I'm trying. Couldn't do it, man. Couldn't do it. All right, on to our next one. First ship as an ambulance officer. Patient having diabetic low is passed out. Give her an injection, taking vitals. She sits straight up and vomits in my face. It took everything I had not to throw up. I show up for second shift. Oh my God, man. Hey. Anyone in the medical field, I don't care what you do. I don't care if you're a nurse. I don't care if you're a paramedic. I don't care if you just drive the ambulance, because there ain't no way in hell I could be driving the ambulance and I'm just hearing like, oh God, there's no way I can hear that. Or even just the sound of somebody dying. I couldn't hear that. I wouldn't be able to drive straight. You know, like it would just be, I would have to put music in. I would have to blast the heaviest metal possible just to drown out the noise. I'm serious, man. I would just be like, yo, I can't do this. Where's my Lorna Shore? Like, bruh. Oh, like, give me some pig squeals or something. Like, there's just no way I could do it. Much respect to you guys, though. I've shoveled a 98-year-old woman who died in her farmhouse in August into a body bag. She died in July. The house had no AC and it was 35 Celsius for a month. By the time I got to her, her family hadn't checked on her for a month and she had liquefied. What? I can still feel the maggots crunching under my feet as I walked into the scene a year later. We could smell her 30 meters away from the house. I stripped down and put on a full Tyvek suit and half-mask respirator before I tried the door. Her skin had desiccated, I think that's how you say it, around her bones, and all her soft tissue spread out into a pool of brown ooze. Everything down from her ribs to the bottom of her pelvis was a ball of maggots. Oh my God. I would be like, I didn't know people could look like that. That is just, whoa. She was liquefied? I mean, I didn't think I was reading that correctly, but yes, liquefied. She was a liquid. Whoa. I mean, I don't know whether to be disgusted or amazed, because that's blowing my mind. I'm telling you, man, there's just some jobs, God, I couldn't do. There's just some jobs I couldn't do, man. There's no way. There's just no way I could do that. I would be sitting there just thinking to myself, like, why am I here? You know, why am I here? What am I doing? This is my life. Like, I would need to be paid just buku bucks to do that job. I hope they do. I hope they get paid a lot of money, because there's just no way, man. He said he had to shovel her. Like, you had to what? Oh my God. Again, people out there, I hope you're not eating while you're doing this. And if you are, you're a psychopath, because there's no way I could be listening to this podcast right now and eating at the same time. I would look at my food like, I just heard that this lady was liquid. There's no way I'd be sitting there being able to eat something. Like, my stomach's kind of churning right now. It's probably because I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything. But I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. All right, on to the next one. When my son was a baby, he used to poop while napping, take his diaper off, and smear poop all over the walls, cribbing himself. I had to wash everything, including him, as he was trying to eat said poop. Oh, God. That's crazy. It happened like twice, and then we had to duct tape his diaper and put onesies on him backwards. Man, because your boy knew how to get out of his onesies and out of his diapers, and he was just like, what the fuck is it? It's like, it smells bad, but I think there's food in this. I don't know. Like, what the hell's going on here? And he was just like, wait a minute, hold up. I can arts and crafts with this? Yo! My man's found out about doo-doo and was just like, man, this is the greatest invention in the entire world. Oh my God. I don't know what goes through babies' heads sometimes, but God damn, man. I can guarantee he was sitting there thinking just like, yo, this is the best invention in the fucking world. Like, I love this damn shit. And this comes out of me? Like, there's unlimited of this stuff? This is great. This is amazing. I love this. I'm down with this. Like, God damn. All right, man, it's tough out here to be a parent. Okay, I'm going to do two more. I was in India for New Year's with a few Indian guys I worked with. We went to his huge nightclub on the beach. My belly wasn't great. We had been driving around eating local food, and I had drank a glass of water at one of the restaurants. Pretty sure it was tap water in retrospect, but I didn't think about it at the time. I really had to go to the bathroom, so I told my friends to wait by the bar. There were thousands of people in this place, and went to the toilets to line up to get in. After 30 minutes, I was almost exploding. I got my turn to go in. No toilets, just a urinal. I quickly left the bar and ran up the street looking for a hotel or something. There was nothing. Everything was gated. It was nighttime. I came to a vacant lot that was full of trash. I had no choice but to go in and squat. I was wearing cream-colored pants. The only thing I could reach was a plastic bag that was on the ground, and I tried to wipe with it, but of course it didn't work. I took off my pants and boxers, wiped with my boxers, put my pants back on commando, and went back to the bar. Lowest point of my life, I drank straight going rum all night, and that seemed to kill the bug. Dude, I've heard a lot. There's a podcast I love to listen to. It's called Dudes Behind the Foods, and it's with one of my favorite creators, Tim Chantarantsu. If you know, he also does No Chaser, and I even have a clip of me like being on No Chaser, which is kind of cool, when he did his live show. And but he also does another show with another creator called David So, and they it's called Dudes Behind the Foods, and they always talk about like the different food that they've had like all over the world and stuff like that. And they always talk about India being one of those places where they just could not eat food from because of how unsanitary a lot of the food is. As great as it may taste, a lot of the food is unsanitary, and they're just like, I can't do it. And yeah, I thought a lot of times, I'm like, maybe they're I don't know, maybe they're getting bad recommendations or something like that. But every single time that I've heard somebody go to India and they're like, oh yeah, I've had the food there and it's given me the shits so bad to where even the atomic bomb would be jealous, and I'm just like, yeah, maybe I don't want to eat Indian food. Maybe I don't want to go to India, like maybe that's not something I want to do, because I've always heard that Indian food is great until it's on its way out, and then it's bad. That's where the shit literally hits the fan, if I'm being honest with you. And so, yeah. I don't know. I mean, if you're the type of person listening right now and you're like, oh my God, I'd love to go to India, for the culture and the food. I don't know, man. Do a little research, I guess. Because every time I've heard about people thinking about going to India or wanting to go to India or anything like that or any of the sort, they are like, yeah, man, I blew up the fucking toilet. I'm surprised he didn't shit up the fucking urinal because, man, and I'm surprised that there was no stalls available because I'm sure everybody else there was in the same position that he was in, and they were probably doo-dooing the crap out of those fucking toilets. I guarantee you, if you would have seen somebody coming out of a stall and you would have went in there, you probably wouldn't have doo-dooed in it, just because of the amount of doo-doo that was probably in that toilet from the previous person, just because of the food. I don't know. Like I said, that's just me. That's just what I've heard. It's kind of crazy. But hey, like I said, I don't know. But yeah, all right, cool. We're going to get on to our last one. Again, hopefully you're not eating, and if you are, man, you're a psychopath. You're crazy. All right, a few years back, I found myself looking for a job. I'm not picky, and found a job from a mink tannery. Okay. It was a part-time job, and I was told to start a week earlier with the other first-timers so that we can learn how to do tanning fast enough. The company gets minks that die of sickness or other reasons around the whole off-season, and those are used for practice since they are small and not that expensive. I don't know what this mink thing is. I don't know what that is. And apparently it says that since those minks die on their own, in worst case scenario, they might be laying for hours in the summer heat before they are found. Before they are found, put to freezer. We newbies started to train on such animals. I was put to the male mink line. Well, the machine used for removing the fur from the mink first grabs the animal from the back legs, stretches the legs side to side, then makes a cut from one leg to the other, passing its butthole and balls. You direct the path of the blade by putting on the tail. And on the hold on. You direct the path of the blade by pulling on the tail of the animal. A few hours into the job, I'm a bit exhausted and breathing through my mouth. I did not pay enough attention since my hands were getting sore and failed to direct the blade to the right spot. The blade hit the rotten, sun-cooked and sperm-filled balls of the mink, and the rotten mink sperm sprayed everywhere, including my mouth still open. So you got pretty much a bunch of mink jizz in your mouth. Because you directed the blade in the wrong way. What the fuck is this job? Like, what do you do? What is going on here? Are these animals already dead, or are they alive, or what the hell is going on here? And then I guess they're doing it for the fur. They're skinning them. Is that right? Is that what's going on here? They're skinning these animals for their fur because they're already dead, or are they alive? I have no clue. And then what the fuck is a mink? Like, where do you live? Like, you know what I mean? Where do you live and what are you doing? He was just like, oh yeah, this is just a casual job you can get, fucking skinning the shit out of animals. And then if the blade goes wrong, apparently, it shoots, sperm like Johnny Sins in your face. Like, what the fuck? What is this? I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate learning new things. It's what I love most about this podcast is that I learn a lot of new shit. Like, I'm all about learning shit. Like, in the past year that I've done this show, it's almost a year. August 14th, it'll be a year, but damn near a year of doing the show. I've learned so many new things and so many crazy things, and it's just wild. And how people kind of live their lives outside of the US and outside of my state that I live in and everything. Like, I've learned so much about this. This is crazy though. I'm like, what the fuck? Like honestly, I get it. The whole my hands are hurting, and so the blade hit the balls, and then the sperm splashed in my face like Johnny Sins and shit. But at the same time, it's like, bro, that wasn't even like the most wildest part of the story. The more wild part is the fact that you took this job. Like, this job is kind of wild. I don't know how I would feel about like putting animals in a machine and then they get like stretched out and then this blade comes in and slices their fur off. Like, what the fuck? I don't know. Maybe I'm a little crazy here, but I mean, do you guys agree with me, right? The job is kind of wild. Unless you guys have done jobs like that before. I mean, if you have, please let me know in the comments. What kind of jobs have you done where, they'd be doing some crazy shit with animals? I mean, I'd love to know. I'd like to learn new things. And I've learned a lot of things, basically from you guys commenting or sharing something and being like, hey man, this is what they were talking about. And a lot of times I look at it and I'm like, whoa, holy shit. Like, thanks for the comment. I appreciate you teaching me something. It's kind of crazy. I don't know. I thought this thread was going to be wild, and boy, did it deliver. And, yeah, boy, did it deliver. Jesus. I think I said it on the Sunday episode that the threads have been getting juicy as of lately. And I mean juicy as of lately, because you guys have been recommending a lot of these threads. And I'm like, fuck it, why not? I'm giving the people what they want. And boy, have you guys been delivering. Sheesh. All right. I'm going to hop into announcements, make them super quick, and then we're going to get into chapter 17 and 18 of our book. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that thread. That was a juicy thread. Wild thread, kind of crazy. I hope you guys learned something new. Hopefully you didn't throw up yourself. And if you're eating and listening to that thread, man, you have an iron stomach and you're a psychopath. But patreon.com/MyTheAsshole Podcast, get an exclusive episode every single Friday, as well as being able to send in your scenarios to be featured on the Tuesday and Sunday show. Again, I would like to make this announcement super quick. After August 14th, after that, I'm going to be doing Sunday episodes still, but we're going to be doing them every other week. I do a lot of filming, I think, 4 episodes a week. It gets very taxing and it's very tiring. And so I look at it like I'd love to be able to take at least, a day off here and there. I'll still be filming every single week. It's just I won't be filming as much every other week. So that's what we're going to be doing. That's not going to start until after August 14th. So once the podcast is a year old, we do kind of the 1 year celebration and all that kind of stuff for the podcast. Then that's when I'm going to be doing that. We're going to be doing every other Sunday. So if you are sending in your scenarios to be featured on the Tuesday and Sunday shows, on the Sunday shows, like I said, it's just going to be every other week. We're still going to have that Sunday episode. Don't get me wrong. It's just going to be every other week, but you will most likely see your episodes on Tuesday. Okay. So, and then, again, keep sending them in the Patreon, get that exclusive episode every single Friday. We're going to be doing our free Patreon Day episode next week. So hopefully you guys enjoy that and you're lookout for that. And then, if you want to help on the free 99 side of things, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, as well as YouTube. That helps out a lot. If you're an audio listener, keep rating the podcast as well as downloading. It shows me that you guys are coming back to see every single episode and you guys are enjoying every single episode. So without further ado, let's get into chapter 17 and 18 of our book. I'm going to move you guys over now.
Chapter 17.
Right.
I jerked awake in the middle of the night, panting. My dreams had been filled with the clicking of the Suriel's bone fingers, the grinning Naga, and the pale, faceless woman dragging her blood-red nails across my throat, splitting me open bit by bit. She kept asking for my name, but every time I tried to speak, my blood bubbled out of the shallow wounds on my neck, choking me. I ran my hands through my sweat-damp hair. As my panting eased, a different sound filled the air, creeping in from the front hall through the crack beneath the door. Shouts, and someone's screams. I was out of my bed in a heartbeat. The shouts weren't aggressive, but rather commanding, organizing. But the screaming... Every hair on my body stood upright as I flung open the door. I might have stayed and cowered, but I'd heard screams like that before, in the forest at home, when I didn't make a clean kill, and the animals suffered. I couldn't stand it, and I had to know. I reached the top of the grand staircase in time to see the front doors of the manor bang open and Tamlin rush in, a screaming fairy slung over his shoulder. The fairy was almost as big as Tamlin, and yet the High Lord carried him as if he were no more than a sack of grain. Another species of the lesser fairies, with his blue skin, gangly limbs, pointed ears, and long onyx hair. But even from atop the stairs, I could see the blood gushing down the fairy's back. Blood from the black stumps protruding from his shoulder blades. Blood that now soaked into Tamlin's green tunic in deep, shining splotches. One of the knives from his baldric was missing. Lucian rushed into the foyer below, just as Tamlin shouted, "The table, clear it off!" Lucian shoved the vase of flowers off the long table in the center of the hall. Either Tamlin wasn't thinking straight, or he'd been afraid to waste the extra minutes before bringing the fairy to the infirmary. Shattering glass set my feet moving, and I was halfway down the stairs before Tamlin eased the shrieking fairy face first onto the table. The fairy wasn't wearing a mask. There was nothing to hide the agony contorting his long, unearthly features.
Scouts found him dumped just over the borderline,
Tamlin explained to Lucian, but his eyes darted to me. They flashed with warning, but I took another step down. He said to Lucian,
"He's Summer Court."
"By the cauldron," Lucian said, surveying the damage.
"My wings!"
the fairy choked out, his glossy black eyes wide and staring at nothing. "She took my wings." Again, that nameless she who haunted their lives. If she wasn't ruling the spring court, then perhaps she ruled another. Tamlin flicked a hand, and steaming water and bandages just appeared on the table. My mouth dried up, but I reached the bottom of the stairs and kept walking toward the table and the death that was surely hovering in this hall. "She took my wings," said the fairy. "She took my wings," he repeated, clutching the edge of the table with spindly blue fingers. Tamlin murmured a soft, wordless sound, gentle in a way I hadn't heard before, and picked up a rag to dunk in the water. I took up a spot across the table from Tamlin, and the breath whooshed from my chest as I beheld the damage. Whoever she was, she hadn't just taken his wings, she'd ripped them off. Blood oozed from the black, velvety stumps on the fairy's back. The wounds were jagged, cartilage and tissue severed in what looked like uneven cuts, as if she'd sawed off his wings bit by bit. "She took my wings," the fairy said again, his voice breaking. As he trembled, shock taking over, his skin shimmered with veins of pure gold, iridescent, like a blue butterfly.
"Keep still," Tamlin ordered, wringing the rag. "You'll bleed out faster."
"No," the fairy started, and began to twist onto his back, away from Tamlin, from the pain that was surely coming when that rag touched those raw stumps. It was instinct, or mercy, or desperation, perhaps, to grab the fairy's upper arms and shove him down again, pinning him to the table as gently as I could. He thrashed, strong enough that I had to concentrate solely on holding him. His skin was velvet smooth and slippery, a texture I would never be able to paint. Not even if I had eternity to master it. But I pushed against him, gritting my teeth and willing him to stop. I looked to Lucian, but the color had blanched from his face, leaving a sickly white green in its wake.
"Lucian,"
Tamlin said, a quiet command. But Lucian kept gaping at the fairy's ruined back, at the stumps, his metal eye narrowing and widening, narrowing and widening. He backed up a step, and another, and then vomited in a potted plant before sprinting from the room. The fairy twisted again, and I held tight, my arms shaking with the effort. His injuries must have weakened him greatly if I could keep him pinned. "Please," I breathed. "Please hold still." "She took my wings," the fairy sobbed. "She took them." "I know," I murmured, my fingers aching. "I know." Tamlin touched the rag to one of the stumps, and the fairy screamed so loudly that my senses guttered, sending me staggering back. He tried to rise, but his arms buckled, and he collapsed face first onto the table again. Blood gushed, so fast and bright that it took me a heartbeat to realize that a wound like this required a tourniquet, and that the fairy had lost far too much blood for it to even make a difference. It poured down his back and onto the table, where it ran to the edge and drip, drip, dripped to the floor near my feet. I found Tamlin's eyes on me.
"The wounds aren't clotting,"
he said under his breath as the fairy panted. "Can't you use your magic?" I asked, wishing I could rip that mask off his face and see his full expression. Tamlin swallowed hard. No, not for major damage. Once, but not any longer. The fairy on the table whimpered, his panting slowing. "She took my wings," he whispered. Tamlin's green eyes flickered, and I knew right then that the fairy was going to die. Death wasn't just hovering in this hall, it was counting down the fairy's remaining heartbeats. I took one of the fairy's hands in mine. The skin there was almost leathery, and perhaps more out of reflex than anything, his long fingers wrapped around mine, covering them completely. "She took my wings," he said again, his shaking subsiding a bit. I brushed the long, damp hair from the fairy's half-turned face, revealing a pointed nose and a mouth full of sharp teeth. His dark eyes shifted to mine, beseeching, pleading. "It will be all right," I said, and hoped he couldn't smell lies the way the Suriel was able to. I stroked his limp hair, its texture like liquid night. Another I would never be able to paint, but would try to, perhaps forever. "It will be all right." The fairy closed his eyes, and I tightened my grip on his hand. Something wet touched my feet, and I didn't need to look down to see that his blood had pooled around me. "My wings," the fairy whispered. "You'll get them back." The fairy struggled to open his eyes. "You swear?" "Yes," I breathed. The fairy managed a slight smile and closed his eyes again. My mouth trembled. I wished for something else to say, something more to offer him than my empty promises. The first false vow I'd ever sworn. But Tamlin began speaking, and I glanced up to see him take the fairy's other hand. "Cauldron save you," he said, reciting the words of a prayer that was probably older than the mortal realm. "Mother hold you. Pass through the gates and smell that immortal land of milk and honey. Fear no evil. Feel no pain." Tamlin's voice wavered, but he finished. "Go and enter eternity." The fairy heaved one final sigh, and his hand went limp in mine. I didn't let go, though, and kept stroking his hair, even when Tamlin released him and took a few steps from the table. I could feel Tamlin's eyes on me, but I wouldn't let go. I didn't know how long it took for a soul to fade from the body. I stood in the puddle of blood until it grew cold, holding the fairy's spindly hand and stroking his hair, wondering if he knew I'd lied when I'd sworn he would get his wings back, wondering if, wherever he had now gone, he had gotten them back. A clock chimed somewhere in the house, and Tamlin gripped my shoulder. I hadn't realized how cold I'd become until the heat of his hand warmed me through my nightgown. "He's gone. Let him go." I studied the fairy's face. So unearthly, so inhuman. Who could be so cruel to hurt him like that? "Feyre," Tamlin said, squeezing my shoulder. I brushed the fairy's hair behind his long pointed ear, wishing I'd known his name, and let go. Tamlin led me up the stairs, neither of us caring about the bloody footprints I left behind, or the freezing blood soaking the front of my nightgown. I paused at the top of the steps, though, twisting out of his grip, and gazed at the table in the foyer below. We can't leave him there, I said, making to step down. Tamlin caught my elbow. I know, he said, the words so drained and weary. I was going to walk you upstairs first. Before he buried him. I want to go with you. It's too deadly at night for you to... I can hold my... No, he said, his green eyes flashing. I straightened, but he sighed, his shoulders curving inward. I must do this. Alone. His head was bowed. No claws, no fangs. There was nothing to be done against this enemy, this fate. No one for him to fight. So I nodded, because I would have wanted to do it alone too, and turned toward my bedroom. Tamlin remained at the top of the stairs. Feyre, he said, softly enough that I faced him again. Why? He tilted his head to the side. You dislike our kind on a good day. And after Andres... Even in the darkened hallway, his usually bright eyes were shadowed. So why? I took a step closer to him, my blood-covered feet sticking to the rug. I glanced down the stairs to where I could still see the prone form of the fairy and the stumps of his wings. Because I wouldn't want to die alone, I said, and my voice wobbled as I looked at Tamlin again, forcing myself to meet his stare. Because I'd want someone to hold my hand until the end, and a while after that. That's something everyone deserves, human or fairy. I swallowed hard, my throat painfully tight. I regret what I did to Andres, I said, the words so strangled they were no more than a whisper. I regret that there was such hate in my heart. I wish I could undo it, and I'm sorry. So very sorry. I couldn't remember the last time, if ever, I'd spoken to anyone like that. But he just nodded and turned away, and I wondered if I should say more, if I should kneel and beg for his forgiveness. If he felt such grief, such guilt over a stranger, then Andres... By the time I opened my mouth, he was already down the steps. I watched him, watched every movement he made, the muscles of his body visible through that blood-soaked tunic, watched that invisible weight bearing down on his shoulders. He didn't look at me as he scooped up the broken body and carried it to the garden doors beyond my line of sight. I went to the window at the top of the stairs, watching as Tamlin carried the fairy through the moonlit garden and into the rolling fields beyond. He never once glanced back. Chapter 18. The next day, the blood of the fairy had been cleaned up by the time I ate, washed, and dressed. I'd taken my time in the morning, and it was nearly noon as I stood atop the staircase, peering down at the entry hall below, just to make sure it was gone. I'd been set on finding Tamlin and explaining, truly explaining how sorry I was about Andres. If I was supposed to stay here, stay with him, then I could at least attempt to repair what I'd ruined. I glanced to the large window behind me, the view so sweeping that I could see all the way to the reflecting pool beyond the garden. The water was still enough that the vibrant sky and fat, puffy clouds above were flawlessly reflected. Asking about them seemed vulgar after last night, but maybe once those paints and brushes did arrive, I could venture to the pool to capture it. I might have remained staring out toward that smear of color and light and texture had Tamlin and Lucien not emerged from another wing of the manor, discussing some border patrol or another. They fell silent as I came down the stairs, and Lucian strode right out the front door without so much as a good morning, just a casual wave. Not a vicious gesture, but he clearly had no intention of joining the conversation that Tamlin and I were about to have. I glanced around, hoping for any sign of those paints, but Tam pointed to the open front doors through which Lucian had exited. Beyond them, I could see both of our horses, already saddled and waiting. Lucian was already climbing into the saddle of a third horse. I turned to Tamlin. Stay with him. He will keep me safe and things will get better. Fine. I could do that. Where are we going? My words were half mumbled. Your supplies won't arrive until tomorrow, and the gallery's being cleaned, and my meeting was postponed. Was he rambling? I thought we'd go for a ride. No killing involved, or Naga to worry about. Even as he finished with a half smile, sorrow flickered in his eyes. Indeed, I'd had enough death in the past 2 days. Enough of killing fairies, killing anything. No weapons were sheathed at his side or on his baldric, but a knife hilt glinted at his boot. Where had he buried that fairy? A high lord digging a grave for a stranger. I might not have believed it if I had been told. Might not have believed it if he hadn't offered me sanctuary rather than death. Where to? I asked. He only smiled. I couldn't come up with any words when we arrived, and knew that even if I had been able to paint it, nothing would have done it justice. It wasn't simply that it was the most beautiful place I'd ever been to, or that it filled me with both longing and mirth, but it just seemed right. As if the colors and lights and patterns of the world had come together to form one perfect place, one true bit of beauty. After last night, it was exactly where I needed to be. We sat atop a grassy knoll, overlooking a glade of oaks so wide and high they could have been the pillars and spires of an ancient castle. Shimmering tufts of dandelion fluff drifted by, and the floor of the clearing was carpeted with swaying crocuses and snowdrops and bluebells. It was an hour or two past noon by the time we arrived, but the light was thick and golden. Though the three of us were alone, I could have sworn I heard singing. I hugged my knees and drank in the glen. We brought a blanket, Tamlin said, and I looked over my shoulder to see him jerk his chin to the purple blanket they'd laid out a few feet away. Lucian plopped down onto it and stretched his legs. Tamlin remained standing, waiting for my response. I shook my head and faced forward, tracing my hand through the feather-soft grass, cataloging its color and texture. I'd never felt grass like it, and I certainly wasn't going to ruin the experience by sitting on a blanket. Rushed whispers were exchanged behind me, and before I could turn around to investigate, Tamlin took a seat at my side. His jaw was clenched tight enough that I stared ahead. "What is this place?" I said, still running my fingers through the grass. Out of the corner of my eye, Tamlin was no more than a glittering golden figure. "Just a glen." Behind us, Lucian snorted. "Do you like it?" Tamlin asked quickly. The green of his eyes matched the grass between my fingers, and the amber flecks were like the shafts of sunlight that streamed through the trees. Even his mask, odd and foreign, seemed to fit into the glen, as if this place had been fashioned for him alone. I could picture him here in his beast form, curled up in the grass, dozing. "What?" I said. I'd forgotten his question.
Do you like it?
He repeated, and his lips tugged into a smile. I took an uneven breath and stared at the glen again. Yes. He chuckled.
That's it? Yes?
Would you like me to grovel with gratitude for bringing me here, High Lord?
Ah, the Suriel told you nothing important, did it?
That smile of his sparked something bold in my chest. He also said that you like being brushed, and if I'm a clever girl, I might train you with treats. Tamlin tipped his head to the sky and roared with laughter. Despite myself, I let out a soft laugh.
I might die of surprise, Lucian said behind me. You made a joke, Feyre.
I turned to look at him with a cool smile. You don't want to know what the Suriel said about you. I flicked my brows up, and Lucian lifted his hands in defeat.
I'd pay good money to hear what the Suriel thinks of Lucian, Tamlin said.
A cork popped, followed by the sounds of Lucian chugging the bottle's contents and chuckling with a muttered, "Brushed." Tamlin's eyes were still bright with laughter as he put a hand at my elbow, pulling me to my feet.
Come on,
he said, jerking his head down the hill to the little stream that ran along its base.
I want to show you something.
I got to my feet, but Lucian remained sitting on the blanket and lifted the bottle of wine in salute. He took a slug from it as he sprawled on his back and gazed at the green canopy. Each of Tamlin's movements was precise and efficient, his powerfully muscled legs eating up the earth as we wove between the towering trees, hopped over tiny brooks, and clambered up steep knolls. We stopped atop a mound, and my hands slackened at my sides. There, in a clearing surrounded by towering trees, lay a sparkling silver pool. Even from a distance, I could tell that it wasn't water, but something more rare and infinitely more precious. Tamlin grasped my wrist and tugged me down the hill, his calloused fingers gently scraping against my skin. He let go of me to leap over the root of the tree in a single maneuver and prowled to the water's edge. I could only grind my teeth as I stumbled after him, heaving myself over the root. He crouched by the pool and cupped his hand to fill it. He tilted his hand, letting the water fall. Have a look. The silvery, sparkling water that dribbled from his hand set ripples dancing across the pool, each glimmering with various colors, and... "That looks like starlight," I breathed. He huffed a laugh, filling and emptying his hand again. I gaped at the glittering water.
It is starlight.
That's impossible, I said, fighting the urge to take a step toward the water.
This is Prythian. According to your legends, nothing is impossible.
How? I asked, unable to take my eyes from the pool. The silver, but also the blue and red and pink and yellow glinting beneath. The lightness of it.
I don't know. I never asked, and no one ever explained.
When I continued gaping at the pool, he laughed, drawing away my attention, only for me to find him unbuttoning his tunic.
Jump in,
he said, the invitation dancing in his eyes. A swim, unclothed, alone, with a High Lord. I shook my head, falling back a step. His fingers paused at the second button from his collar.
Don't you want to know what it's like?
I didn't know what he meant. Swimming in starlight or swimming with him? No.
All right.
He left his tunic unbuttoned. There was only bare, muscled golden skin beneath. Why this place? I asked, tearing my eyes away from his chest.
This was my favorite haunt as a boy.
Which was when? I couldn't stop the question from coming out. He cut a glance in my direction.
A very long time ago.
He said it so quietly that it made me shift on my feet. A very long time ago indeed, if he'd been a boy during the war. Well, I'd started down that road, so I ventured to ask, "Is Lucian all right? After last night, I mean." He seemed back to his usual snide, irreverent self, but he'd vomited at the sight of that dying fairy. He didn't react well. Tamlin shrugged, but his words were soft as he said,
Lucian has endured things that make times like last night difficult. Not just the scar in the eye, though I bet last night brought back memories of that too.
Tamlin rubbed at his neck, then met my stare. Such an ancient heaviness in his eyes, in the set of his jaw.
Lucian is the youngest son of the High Lord of the Autumn Court.
I straightened.
The youngest of 7 brothers. The Autumn Court is cutthroat. Beautiful, but his brothers see each other only as competition, since the strongest of them will inherit the title, not the eldest. It is the same throughout Prithian, at every court. Lucian never cared about it, never expected to be crowned High Lord, so he spent his youth doing everything a High Lord's son probably shouldn't. Wandering the courts, making friends with the sons of other High Lords.
A faint gleam in Tamlin's eyes at that.
And being with females who were a far cry from the nobility of the Autumn Court.
Tamlin paused for a moment, and I could almost feel the sorrow before he said,
Lucian fell in love with a fairy whom his father considered to be grossly inappropriate for someone of his bloodline. Lucian said he didn't care that she wasn't one of the High Fae, that he was certain the mating bond would snap into place soon, and that he was going to marry her and leave his father's court to his scheming brothers.
A tight sigh.
His father had her put down, executed in front of Lucian, as his 2 eldest brothers held him and made him watch.
My stomach turned, and I pushed a hand against my chest. I couldn't imagine, couldn't comprehend that sort of loss.
Lucian left. He cursed his father, abandoned his title and the Autumn Court, and walked out. And without his title protecting him, his brothers thought to eliminate one more contender to the High Lord's crown. 3 of them went out to kill him. 1 came back.
Lucian killed them?
He killed 1, Tamlin said. I killed the other, as they had crossed into my territory, and I was now High Lord and could do what I wanted with trespassers threatening the peace of my lands.
A cold, brutal statement.
I claimed Lucian as my own, named him emissary, since he'd already made many friends across the courts, and had always been good at talking to people, while I can find it difficult. He's been here ever since.
As emissary, I began. Has he ever had dealings with his father? Or his brothers?
Yes. His father has never apologized, and his brothers are too frightened of me to risk harming him.
No arrogance in those words, just icy truth.
But he has never forgotten what they did to her, or what his brothers tried to do to him, even if he pretends that he has.
It didn't quite excuse everything Lucian had said and done to me, but I understood now. I could understand the walls and barriers he had no doubt constructed around himself. My chest was too tight, too small to fit the ache building in it. I looked at the pool of glittering starlight and let out a heavy breath. I needed to change the subject. What would happen if I were to drink the water? Tamlin straightened a bit, then relaxed, as if glad to release that old sadness.
Legend claims you'd be happy until your last breath.
He added,
Perhaps we both need a glass.
I don't think that entire pool would be enough for me, I said, and he laughed.
2 jokes in one day. A miracle sent from the cauldron, he said.
I cracked a smile. He came a step closer, as if forcibly leaving behind the dark, sad stain of what had happened to Lucian, and the starlight danced in his eyes as he said,
What would be enough to make you happy?
I blushed from my neck to the top of my head. I don't know. It was true. I'd never given that sort of thing any thought beyond getting my sisters safely married off and having enough food for me and my father, and time to learn to paint.
He said, not stepping away. What about the ringing of bluebells? Or a ribbon of sunshine? Or a garland of moonlight?
He grinned wickedly. High Lord of Prithian, indeed. High Lord of Foolery was more like it. And he knew I'd say no, that I'd squirm a bit from merely being alone with him.
No, I wouldn't let him have the satisfaction of embarrassing me.
I'd had enough of that lately. Enough of that girl encased in ice and bitterness. So I gave him a sweet smile, doing my best to pretend that my stomach wasn't flipping over itself. A swim sounds delightful. I didn't allow myself room for second-guessing, and I took no small amount of pride in the fact that my fingers didn't tremble once as I removed my boots, then unbuttoned my tunic and pants and shucked them onto the grass. My undergarments were modest enough that I wasn't showing much, but I still looked straight at him as I stood on the grassy bank. The air was warm and mild, and a soft breeze kissed its way across my bare stomach. Slowly, so slowly, his eyes roved down, then up, as if he were studying every inch, every curve of me. And even though I wore my ivory underthings, that gaze alone stripped me bare. His eyes met mine, and he gave me a lazy smile before removing his clothes, button by button. I could have sworn the gleam in his eyes turned hungry and feral, enough so that I had to look anywhere but at his face. I let myself indulge in the glimpse of a broad chest, arms corded with muscle, and long, strong legs before I walked right into that pool. He wasn't built like Isaac, whose body had very much still been in that gangly place between boy and man. No, Tamlin's glorious body was honed by centuries of fighting and brutality. The liquid was delightfully warm, and I strode in until it was deep enough to swim out a few strokes and casually tread in place. Not water, but something smoother, thicker. Not oil, but something purer, thinner. Like being wrapped in warm silk. I was so busy savoring the tug of my fingers through the silvery substance that I didn't notice him until he was treading beside me.
"Who taught you to swim?"
he asked, and dunked his head under the surface. When he came up, he was grinning, sparkling streams of starlight running along the contours of his mask. I didn't go under. Didn't quite know if he'd been joking about the water making me mirthful if I drank it. When I was 12, I watched the village children swimming at a pond and figured it out myself. It had been one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, and I'd swallowed half the pond in the process, but I'd gotten the gist of it, managed to conquer my blind panic and terror and trust myself. Knowing how to swim had seemed like a vital ability, one that might someday mean the difference between life and death. I'd never expected it would lead to this, though. He went under again, and when he emerged, he ran a hand through his golden hair.
How did your father lose his fortune?
How'd you know about that? Tamlin snorted.
I don't think born peasants have your kind of diction.
Some part of me wanted to come up with a comment about snobbery, but, well, he was right, and I couldn't blame him for being a skilled observer. My father was called the Prince of Merchants, I said plainly, treading that silky, strange water. I hardly had to put any effort into it. The water was so warm, so light, that it felt as if I were floating in air, every ache in my body oozing away into nothing. But that title, which he'd inherited from his father and his father before that, was a lie. We were just a good name that masked 3 generations of bad debts. My father had been trying to find a way to ease those debts for years, and when he found an opportunity to pay them off, he took it, regardless of the risks. I swallowed. 8 years ago, he amassed our wealth on 3 ships to sail to Bharat for invaluable spices and cloth. Tamlin frowned.
Risky indeed. Those waters are a death trap, unless you go the long way.
Well, he didn't go the long way. It would have taken too much time, and our creditors were breathing down his neck. So he risked sending the ships directly to Bharat. They never reached Bharat's shores. I tipped my hair back in the water, clearing the memory of my father's face the day that news arrived of the sinking. When the ships sank, the creditors circled him like wolves. They ripped him apart until there was nothing left of him but a broken name and a few gold pieces to purchase that cottage. I was 11. My father, he just stopped trying after that. I couldn't bring myself to mention that final ugly moment when that other creditor had come with his cronies to wreck my father's leg.
That's when you started hunting?
No. Even though we moved to the cottage, it took almost 3 years for the money to entirely run out, I said. I started hunting when I was 14. His eyes twinkled. No trace of the warrior forced to accept a high lord's burden.
And here you are. What else did you figure out for yourself?
Maybe it was the enchanted pool. Or maybe it was the genuine interest behind the question, but I smiled and told him about those years in the woods. Tired, but surprisingly content from a few hours of swimming and eating and lounging in the glen, I eyed Lucian as we rode back to the manor that afternoon. We were crossing a broad meadow of new spring grass when he caught me glancing at him for the 10th time, and I braced myself as he fell back from Tamlin's side. The metal eye narrowed on me while the other remained wary, unimpressed.
Yes?
That was enough to persuade me not to say anything about his past. I would hate pity, too. And he didn't know me. Not well enough to warrant anything but resentment if I brought it up. Even if it weighed on me to know it, to grieve for him. I waited until Tamlin was far enough ahead that even his high fae hearing might not pick up on my words. I never got to thank you for your advice with the Suriel. Lucian tensed.
Oh?
I looked ahead at the easy way Tamlin rode, the horse utterly unbothered by his mighty rider. If you still want me dead, I said, you might have to try a bit harder. Lucian loosed a breath.
That's not what I intended. I gave him a long look. I wouldn't shed any tears, he amended. I knew it was true. But what happened to you?
I was joking, I said, and gave him a little smile.
You can't possibly forgive me that easily for sending you into danger.
No. and part of me would like nothing more than to wallop you for your lack of warning about the cereal. But I understand. I'm a human who killed your friend, who now lives in your house, and you have to deal with me. I understand, I said again. He was quiet for long enough that I thought he wouldn't reply. Just as I was about to move ahead, he spoke. Tam told me that your first shot was to save the Suriel's life, not your own. It seemed like the right thing to do. The look he gave me was more contemplative than any he'd given me before. I know far too many high fae and lesser fairies who wouldn't have seen it that way, or bothered. He reached for something at his side and tossed it to me. I had to fight to stay in the saddle as I fumbled for it. A jeweled hunting knife. I heard you scream, he said, as I examined the blade in my hands. I'd never held one so finely crafted, so perfectly balanced. And I hesitated. Not long, but I hesitated before I came running. Even though Tam got there in time, I still broke my word in those seconds I waited. He jerked his chin at the knife. It's yours. Don't bury it in my back, please. Chapter 9.
All right. And that has been chapters 17 and 18. Yo. Ha! Ya boy. Ya boy Tamlin. Hey, man. He like, so what makes you happy, baby? What would make you happy? You know, if you drank that water, you'd be happy forever. You know, and then he was looking at her. He was like, yeah, damn. You look fantastic, and whatever her undergarments were, you know, boy was like, God damn. She was thinking the same thing. He was like unbuttoning his tunic all slow, and she was just like, Jesus, this man's crazy. Like old boy back in the other village, man, he could never. But that's going to go ahead and be today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you got this far, thank you so much. I love you all. I appreciate all the support you guys have been showing. And I will see you guys on, I believe, Friday. Should be the free Patreon Day episode. So I'll see you guys on Friday, and then I'll see you on Sunday for a special announcement that we'll have on Sunday. But without further ado, though, love you all. I'll see you later, and peace.